Welcome back to the workshop. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the new xTool M1 5-watt hybrid desktop laser and blade cutting machine.
Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow.
Before we dive into the video talking about the xTool M1, I want to say thank you to xTool for sending it to me for evaluation and testing. They did provide me with the machine, however, they did not pay me for this video, so let's get into my absolute honest assessment of it. When they first emailed me about it, I took a look at it and I was like, why would anybody want something like this when you could get a diode laser or you could just get a craft cutter? But the thing is, after using it, I'm like, holy crap, there is a place in my home for this little machine. I'm only giving you the TLDR highlight right now of what my final conclusion is, because sometimes people just want to skip around to the video to see that part. And I'm going to just be very honest and let you know that this is a winner. So what is it exactly? It's as if you took a craft cutter and a diode laser and smooshed them together and they made sweet love together, and then boop, out comes this beautiful child. xTool originally came out with the M1 as the first ever hybrid desktop laser blade cutter machine, but it was a 10-watt machine, and perhaps the price point was a little bit much for your average crafter or DIY person. Somebody who's just going to dabble in things or might need a secondary machine to do more than one thing instead of just like the one specialty thing, which is absolutely fine, especially if you have limited space. I mean, have you ever seen my crafting room? I can't put anything else in there, hence the workshop. But now they have a 5-watt version of it, which is pretty darn awesome. And as you know, someone who actually has a ton of lasers, it's got its uses. It can cut and or engrave up to 300 materials. But since it is a diode laser, I need to remind you, it is not going to do much with a translucent acrylic. In fact, since it is a 5-watt laser, it's probably not even going to cut through 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/16 of an inch solid color acrylic. But that's just because it's a 5-watt. The 10-watt version absolutely could do that. But is that really what you need? If you're gonna go for a budget-friendly 5-watt version of the M1? Probably not. In general, you're gonna be limited to about 3 millimeters of thickness on any material put under it anyway. But that's fine, because again, this is meant to be an entry-level laser or blade cutter machine. It's speedy too. It can go up to 15,000 millimeters per minute. That's pretty ding-dang fast. It also comes equipped with a camera that's 16 megapixels for accurate placement, and it autofocuses. This means no guesswork, no moving things around in light burn, and no fussing with what you think the focus should or shouldn't be if you want to defocus and all this other stuff. It basically is very plug and play. It has a built-in safety shield and safety features. It will not run if you open up the top of this thing. It will cut off. I did test that. You probably shouldn't be like me, but I did test it just to make sure that it does go, oh heck nah, and cuts itself off while it's running if you open the lid. But it is a safety lid, but again, safety standards, don't stare at the laser. It also has its own exhaust fan to pull out any dust and smoke and debris and push it out through the provided air filtration tubing. I have mine shooting out of the garage. If you want to put this in like your home office, you do need to push that stuff out a window. And while it wasn't provided to me, it does have a rotary attachment that you can purchase separately, and just in case you have some super tall items, you can remove the base plate that's on the inside and then lift the machine up on risers so that you can do taller items like tumblers, pet bowls, glassware, and all of that stuff. It's also super light. If I can lift it, you can lift it. I mean, I'm on lift restriction still thanks to my hip. There are two different widths in terms of the work area size. When you're using the laser, you have about 15 inches to work with width-wise. If you're using the blade, you're only going to have 14 inches. That's still a pretty decent amount of width that you're working with. That's about 2 inches larger than your average craft cutting machine, so that's pretty cool. Now, as far as the height, you're working with about 11.8 inches. Some materials might say like 12 inches, but that's rounding up. It's 300 millimeters, which is 11.8 for people who don't know how to do math. Hi, that's me. I don't know how to do math. If you've seen me set up other diode lasers, then you know there's a lot of work that goes into them. Even if they do try to set it up so it's like maybe 4 or 5 steps. This one, the only thing I had to do, apart from plugging in the power cord and of course the USB cable to my laptop, was install the blade. That was it. It comes with 5 blades, so you can replace them as needed, and you didn't even have to turn around and spend an extra $100 on the blades. Yeah, that's a jab to those big companies that make the craft cutters that are like, oh, you want an extra blade? Give me $50. In fact, this was probably the most easy thing to set up. Not only did I just have to plug it in, put it on my computer, download the xTool Creative Suite software, and just install a blade, it was just like go, go, go. I was up and running so quickly. The only thing that I had to spend time on was dialing in things for like the marine vinyl fabric, because that required a little bit of tweaking and experimentation, but everything else was just bare bones, whatever their default settings were. In fact, let's run through some of those materials now, and I can give you kind of an idea, at least from the bag maker's perspective, of pretty much everything that I needed to do to cut waterproof canvas, marine vinyl, and then of course cut out some wood, engrave some wood, and stainless steel. With a 14-inch by 11.5-ish inches of space to work with on the cutting section, that's pretty sizable. Not so much if you're trying to do a lot of production work, but this is also something you can set to the side and have it work on while you're doing something else in your room. I was able to import a couple of the pieces from the production version of the Perfect Pouch to cut out of vinyl. And because I would want to use this both as a laser and as a blade cutting machine so that I could do vinyls and of course waterproof canvas since it has PVC backing, I want to be able to cut and do both. So in the drop down off to the right, before you start your project, you can actually just select blade cut from that, and it will change the layout so that you can correctly cut within the appropriate space and the framing is accurate. To get started, all you have to do is put the fabric you want to cut on the fabric grip mat, put it into the machine, making careful observation of not letting any overhang fabric that's maybe off the sides of the mat touching the railing to the right. And then once you close the lid, the camera engages and takes an updated snapshot so you can see where it's going to be cutting. So in the software, I can select the pieces that I have, which are from the Perfect Pouch, and I can rotate them and place them wherever it is that I need to ensure that they cut accurately. So you can see here, now that I slid it over to fit a little better into the blade cutting workspace, I can kind of just rejigger these things around and make sure they're gonna fit. And if they don't fit, I will throw a fit, and then we all have ice cream. In what in fact has become the worst possible layout for cutting out the Perfect Pouch on any blade cutter, regardless of size, well, I figured it out. And unfortunately, it's just because I cut a piece of scrap material for some waterproof canvas out, and the selvage is on there, and it's on there real good. But the way that you go forward with this is you select blade cut from the drop-down list, and then you're going to select framing just to make sure, because sometimes the cameras can get knocked out of alignment, or perhaps they're off by a millimeter or so. When you click the framing button, this helpful dialog is going to come up and basically tell you what to do. It has sent the bound information for your cutout for your project to the machine, and all you have to do is press the button in the front to say, hey, do the thing. One thing I did actually forget to mention is that down in the material drop-down list, it will change if you select blade cut, and it's only going to select things that it can actually blade cut. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and go with the PU leather, which is a way of saying faux leather vinyl, the kind that's a fabric. And the reason that I'm doing that is because this is a waterproof canvas. It does have that rubberized backing that's PVC. It can't be cut with a diode laser or any kind of laser really because of the toxic chemicals it will put off when it burns the PVC. So I want to do that because of the pressure that the blade needs. Once I'm ready to go, I just press the start button and we get a nice little preview, and I go to the upper right and I click start. It's going to send the data to the machine, and then all we have to do is press the start button here, which is throbbing a nice little blue color to say it's ready. It will be red if it's not ready or having trouble. Right. So clearly I messed up something, and this is absolute user error, and I like to highlight these things in videos whenever I do instructional stuff or even reviews like this one, because people get to learn from my mistakes and then they don't get repeated by myself or others. So what happened was the blade grabbed on so hard to the material that it slid the mat, and I was wondering what was going on because the mat actually fits in there pretty nicely with a little bit of x-axis shift. So what happened, we're just gonna toss that away. On the back of the cutting mat, both of them have this. There is a second removable sheet of plastic. See, now people who come from craft cutters don't usually have this, so I didn't even think to look. But it's got an adhesive on the back of it so that it will stay in place in the machine. So I'm gonna put this back in with new fabric in place so I can recut everything. The other thing I'm gonna do, because I love my Hail Mary, this ain't happening to me again kind of reactions, is I'm gonna do a little bit of masking tape along the sides just to keep everything kind of pinned down where it should stay. And also, and this is something I do with craft cutters too, I'm going to spray baste the top section here with some quilter's basting spray, which will add a little more tackiness to it for a heavier fabric like what I'm gonna be cutting. Quick tip before I close this up, put the mat in first, then place the material on it. All the mat's doing is protecting the bottom of the machine from getting scratched up and messed up by the blade, and it's also protecting the longevity of the blade by giving it a pliable surface to grind into. So it doesn't matter, it's not one of those things where it has to line up perfectly, but you know, being pulled in and out of a craft cutter, it just needs to protect the bottom of the bed. So stick that in first, tape the sucker down, and then put your fabric in there. Okay, we're gonna do this again. Wham! And off we go. This time it's gonna be fine because I didn't mess up. I actually stuck the mat down like it's supposed to be done. Oh my gosh. I'm leaving this real time, by the way. I know the silence is a little awkward, but I really want to leave this real time so you can see how fast this cuts it. That's pretty cool. That would have taken a craft cutter easily 5 times as long to do what that just did. So let's open it up and take everything out. I'm just gonna rip the fabric up. And to reduce waste, I actually lined these up so that they butted up against each other. It won't cut twice. The software is smart enough to remove any kind of doubling up. And now I have 2 beautiful pieces of lining that have been perfectly cut very quickly with this machine. Holy cow. Let's take an extra close look at this. This is so much better of a cut. It is a cleaner cut than what I've ever gotten on any kind of craft cutter. And the reason for that, honestly, is because those craft cutters, they want you to use the rotary blade, which makes sense for us. But oftentimes, when it comes to the machines trying to do it, they insert additional slits as doing corners, or especially when cutting rectangular shapes that are butted up against each other. If you use something like the blade, it's just going to be more accurate. It's not going to add these extra slits anywhere where there were points, where there were overlap. Like absolutely on a craft cutter down here and down here, I would have expected to see some minor slits, which is not so much of a big deal with this waterproof canvas because it's not going to rip. But if you're doing something like a cotton, that's just annoying. One of the things I do want to call out is I spent a little bit extra time off camera working with vinyl, and I don't mean HTV vinyl. I know this is going to cut that just fine. Any craft cutter could. What we are concerned about as bag makers, or anybody who's aspiring to be a bag maker, is can it cut marine vinyl or just vinyl fabric, not necessarily the thinner stuff, but the good beefy stuff. So I did find that if you went with the default settings, that it will snag and rip if it is a complex shape. So for example, this star here, the first few tests that I did with cutting out said star were a little messy, but I found that once I reduced the pressure by half of whatever the default was and reduced the speed down to 40 and did 3 passes, it was fine. The problem was that it was digging too deeply into the vinyl and basically dragging it instead of cutting it. And so I found it better to kind of chisel away at it multiple times at a slightly slower pressure and speed. And there you go. So enough about those settings. What about wood? What about the laser side of things? Remember these guys? I laid most of them out along the bottom of the machine. You want to lay them vertically like this and line them up with the back bar that's just around where you would have the laser drop. That is what you are going to want. Now, one thing I do need to call out is that this machine has autofocus. Most of the other lasers that I've used in the past, you have to manually focus them by taking a sheet of wood or acrylic of a certain depth and put it underneath the laser, screw it into place, and Bob's your uncle. With this one, it's going to touch down with a little tool to kind of identify where the material is. It's going to do that in the back left corner. So that's where you need to start, as in that's where you're going to start putting your material. When you've clicked off your project, you need to go up to change out what you're going to be doing. You're going to be laser flat. So we're going to click on laser flat, and that's going to, again, change our layout so that we know where things are. You can see a little bit of a shadow of the laser head assembly right there. That's going to be just fine. We're going to first try a cut. I definitely want to see how that does. And we're going to leave the default settings. I take that back. We're going to click here, or rather off here, and we're going to choose the 3mm basswood plywood. So that is the plywood that was provided. You can see down here with the information. This would probably work for any of the plywoods that you're using, and the thickness is going to be 3mm. And I am going to say that I am using the triangular prisms, which are the bars. You can kind of see them through here. If you don't tell it that, then it's going to incorrectly assess where it should be going for focus. So that's important. And the reason I'm using the prisms is because I'm cutting and I don't want any flashback. So you take this star and kind of slide it over a bit. We're a little too close to the edge there. Okay, and now with that, I am going to click go, and we're going to see this thing cut out. Let's open this up and see, shall we? I want to see if it did it in one pass. Oh my gosh, it did! It actually did. It did it in one pass. That's freaking awesome. I don't mean to sound so surprised. It's just I've reviewed so many diode lasers that needed to do multiple passes when they say they can do it in one. So to see this actually go through one time was actually pretty awesome. And to be fair, you could probably even dial back the power a bit. Their default settings for the 3mm basswood on a cut was 100% power with 3 millimeters per second kind of glide for the speed. But it's charred on the edges, but you could dial that back manually if you want. And again, you gotta do this with like every laser to an extent, but this is probably the most plug and play thing I've ever received. So now you might be wondering, well, what about the engraving? We've cut a bunch of stuff. What about that? The whole engraving thing that I love to do with my lasers. Well, I am happy to say it was great. Since you couldn't really see what was going on anyway with some of the video footage that I've been taking because of the safety lid and the laser head blocking everything, I just did it a little bit off camera. I just put Fierce Rocks on here using their software, and then also did a score line around the welded letters, which again, I could do in their software. The default settings were perfection. This thing is awesome. I've mentioned it's a diode laser, right? Which means it can mark stainless steel. Ooh, look at the stainless steel engraving. Ooh, shiny. And the settings for that little dog tag were built into their software. And no, I didn't do a big project with this video because I've done so many, and I really just wanted to highlight the features from a high level and give my honest to goodness thoughts on the machine. If you do go into the program and you look at the xTool projects that they offer, you can see a ton of options out there that are free projects or shared projects, just as you would with any of the big brand name craft cutters. Now they do use their own proprietary software called the xTool Creative Suite. And as much as I have a disdain for proprietary software, at least this is downloadable and installable to your computer, your Mac, iOS, Android, etc. So it's definitely one of those where you can install it and use it instead of going to a website and using it, which is always kind of sketchy. If you're a huge laser enthusiast and you want to use Lightburn, you can. There are options to export the G-code straight out of Lightburn and basically push it to the machine, but you still have to use their software to do that. But again, why? This is not the kind of machine that you would give a hootenanny about using Lightburn with, I'm sorry. It's exactly like taking a sledgehammer to install one nail into your wall to hang a tiny picture. So let's talk about pricing, because everybody's gonna wanna know, okay, well, what am I in for? So this goes for, at least by the time I've recorded this, which is in August of 2023, it is just shy of $700 for the 5-watt version of the xTool M1. This is comparable to any other type of brand that's decided to do a recent knockoff of it, but that one's $500 more. It's pretty much the same price as a 10-watt diode laser, basic diode laser package, no honeycomb, no table protector, and you'd have to build it, configure it, and then figure out all your settings for every material, plus buy Lightburn. So you're like, all right, fine, I'll just get a craft cutter. Well, that's fine, and you can absolutely make that decision. But this one is only maybe $100 to $200 more than a basic craft cutter package. And that doesn't include getting all of the different tools that you would need, the different blades, like a rotary blade or a fine tip blade or a scoring blade. You know where I'm going with this, right? It kind of adds up. It's like a la carte sounds great until you make it to the menu and you're like, I want one of everything. And of course, don't negate the cost difference with the fact that it's got a 5-watt laser in it. You can do a lot more than just cut your basic HTV or permanent vinyls. You can do a lot more than cutting cotton, just plain old cotton fabric for quilting squares because you're lazy like me and hate quilting. And basically, my final statements on this are that if you're a huge laser enthusiast, you're probably gonna look at this and go, I don't need this. I've got like insert lasers here all over the workshop behind the camera. However, the fact that I didn't have to spend hours dialing in settings and I could just go is a huge selling point for me. So like this is in here now. So this means I can have my CO2s cutting out things like just the basic canvas fabrics that I need for my bags and in bulk. And then I can use this bad boy to basically cut everything else, like the vinyl and the waterproof canvas, which you cannot cut with a laser, by the way. You'd have to cut it with a blade machine. But I covered that in all of my tests, and the reason I don't like cutting fabric on those blade machines sometimes, or the craft cutters rather, is because of the rotary blade and the way that it handles things. And then the software gatekeeps it so I can't use anything but the rotary blade when I'm cutting fabric because reasons. Honestly, there's only two downsides I can think of. One would be the work area. It's a little restrictive. If you wanted to do a lot more production stuff like I do, like what you saw me kind of fumble through to just get 2 pieces of the waterproof canvas cut out for a perfect pouch, is like, well, okay, well, that's not really production stuff. You know, that's the limitation, but it's something that I personally can work around. The other thing is you do need to put it in a well-ventilated area. That piping has to go out. If you're gonna do anything with the laser and not just the blade cutter, it's gonna be burning away any kind of toxin. And I mean like anything, like the wood can even put out a little bit of toxicity. That needs to be filtered out. There's a reason that I only put the lasers in my workshop, and that's because I can either pump it through the wall, through the dryer vents we installed, or out the garage door. It's a safety thing. And as much as I like smelling campfires, I don't want to smell like one. I don't want my house to smell like one. I don't want my cats to smell like one. So again, with the whole garage workshop setup. But again, if you get really good ventilation upstairs to like basically install this thing on your window to pump it out, you're fine. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening to me and my honest to goodness opinions about the xTool M1 5-watt. It's 5, but it does come in a 10-watt version. If you want to learn more about it, I've put some links in the description below. Please feel free to like and subscribe the video and insert here all those things on YouTube you have to say because reasons. Anyway, thank you so much. I want to hear your thoughts as well. Like any questions you might have about the machine, anything you want me to test out, I'm always happy to do that. Thank you so much.